Hi there everyone, I'm Patrick and I'm back here today to talk a little bit more about Kea. So we've had a really wet and windy last few days in Christchurch, so I thought it would be the perfect chance to sit down and answer some of the questions that I've seen about Kea, both here online and from people who've come to visit us in the aviary. So before I get started, I just want to give a quick shout out to Kay Jefferson in particular. You have great insightful comments on every video that goes up and I always look forward to them. So a lot of the questions that I'm going to answer today are thanks to you. So let's start off with a few questions about Katie. The first one, which is something we get asked quite frequently, is have we ever considered a prosthetic? So if you haven't met Katie, he's actually missing the top part of his bill. It's thought that he either lost it in an attack from a predator or getting it caught in a trap, but he does quite well without it here at Willowbank. We have considered a prosthetic for him, but it's not really worth the extra discomfort of having to manage and maintain a prosthetic as a trade-off for what benefit he'd get from it, especially as he's still capable of doing pretty much anything the other birds can do. The next question is, does Katie get to be included in our platform experiments? And the answer is yes, he does. He is able to manipulate objects by looping it up underneath his tongue and between the lower bill and his tongue. And so he is able to manipulate the tokens that we use and the other objects that are included in our platform experiments. Sometimes we just need to give him a little bit more time. So the last question about Katie for now is, does he have any problems making calls? And the answer to that is no. He's just as vocal as most of the other Kea that we have. In humans, the lips are quite important for the sounds we make, but for birds, most of their sounds come from the voice box. So missing the beak doesn't impact him in the same way that missing lips would for a human. So next question is, what is the social structure of Kea? Kea have what's known as a fission-fusion dynamic. So they'll come together into large flocks, but then also split off into smaller groups. You'll often see juveniles from different clutches all come together and form a bit of a gang to go and cause mischief together. And I think that actually leads quite nicely into the next question, which is, what impact have Joker and Mystique had on our flock? So I think the big impact of having Joker and Mystique is really just increasing the number of juveniles. We see more play behaviour and a bit more vocalisation from the young birds. The older birds will also defer to them quite often, even though they're not necessarily higher in the hierarchy. You'll see the other birds start care for them a bit and feed them sometimes. The young birds are also very curious, so from our perspective we see them hanging around us a bit more, possibly getting in the way a little bit. Another really interesting question is, how do the Kea react to other animals? So our birds share their aviary with a couple of other birds, and occasionally in the river you'll see a eel or possibly a trout swim up from the pond further downstream. The juveniles sometimes get a little bit curious about them and will check them out, but for the most part they tend to just leave each other alone and go about their own business. The biggest reaction you'll see is sometimes if some ducks fly overhead, you'll start hearing a few alarm calls. And we also have some Simon Gibbons over on the other side of the park in the zoo section. And in the mornings, if they start up a round of calls, sometimes our guys will also set off with their own calls, even though they can't actually see each other. Okay, do Kea have heavier feathering to help deal with living in mountainous areas? So Kea are the only species of alpine parrot. That said, their feathers aren't particularly heavy. They're very similar to those of pretty much any other large parrot. What they'll do is fluff their feathers up to trap some air underneath and keep themselves warm. Most of their adaptation to living in that alpine environment are more behavioural, so that's where a lot of their intelligence and curiosity comes from, to find food and survive in a very harsh environment. Do Kea recognise people? Do they react when they see someone they haven't seen for a while? So I like to think they absolutely do. They will come over to us as opposed to general members of the public. And they know that we are a safe place to land on and perch. They know that we won't have a big reaction to them landing on us, whereas they're a bit more cautious about landing on members of the public sometimes. And this also happens when we're not in our work uniform, so they're not just responding to that bright blue vest, they're actually recognising us as individuals. As to whether they respond when they see someone they recognise they haven't seen for a while, there were a couple of weeks at the start of last year when New Zealand had its COVID lockdown where we weren't able to come in and do any research with the birds. And when we returned from that, there was definitely a really big reaction where all the birds came over to us much more than usual. So I would say absolutely they do respond to seeing someone they know if they haven't seen it for a while. Now here's a question I really love, and that is, what do Kea smell like? Kea are quite neutral smelling, but if I have to give an answer, I would probably say something like old books. That said, they are quite a neutral smelling bird. And do you see any cognitive decline in your older Kea? No, we don't, although it's not really something we have data for. I think it would be really cool to give the birds the same task once every 10 years and see how their performance changes over the time. But the bigger variation we see is just between individuals rather than any decline over time. The oldest bird we have is Spike. He's 28 years old, but in captivity, Kea can live upwards of 50 years, so he does still have a nice long full life ahead of him. So the last question for today is, would you rather face one 10 kilogram Kea or 10 1 kilogram Kea? Well, we face the 10 1 kilogram Kea every day. We have 15 birds in our aviary, so we face 15 1 kilogram Kea every day. That said, there is actually a species of extinct New Zealand parrot known as Heracles inexpectus, and it was effectively a 1 metre tall, 10 kilogram Kea. And I would absolutely love to meet and face that bird. That would be amazing. But for now, I'll have to stick to the 10 1 kilogram Kea. So that is everything for today. I hope that helped answer your questions. If you have any more, please do leave them in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and do all the YouTube things if you want to see more videos. And I'll see you for the next one. Bye!